Give it a few seconds for everyone to come in.
I'll refresh this YouTube window I've got open here and see if it shows up. And there it is. All right. On the YouTube window, it looks like it's just the me and Joe show here.
The you and Joe show, yeah.
Did we lose Jesse?
No, I'm here. For some reason my video is not wanting to cooperate with Skype, so
Ooh.
Yeah, we got Dennis, some other people.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. People are showing up. All right.
Cool. Awesome.
Perfect.
Let me retweet. Did you tweet something out?
I am currently doing. I just wanted to put the link in there, so I was waiting a sec to actually get it here. Okay. I will tag you in it though.
Goron in the mud. It's a convenient username. Alright.
That is a great username.
Alright, so everybody's ready? We can...
Yes,
okay.
Let us begin.
Hello everybody and welcome to the 𝐓𝐳𝐿𝐼𝐭𝐴𝐺𝐵. Today it is Daniel and I, and we have two very special guests with us. Returning is Stealth. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Stealth, for those who may not know who you are.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back on. It's been a hot minute, as Daniel said. You know, I tweet about Nintendo, JRPGs, all manner of video game news, and you can find me at Twitter at Stealth40K.
Awesome. And also returning is our special guest for the day is Joe, who a lot of you may know as Daruk or Yunobo. Yunobo?
Yunobo.
Yunobo. Okay, good.
Yunobo.
Yeah. So go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know some of the stuff that you may be known for outside of the world of Zelda.
Yeah, my name is Joe Hernandez. I'm a voice actor out here in LA. You know, right next to some of the other voiceover work that I've done with, you know, Breath of the Wild. I've also been in Rage 2, Kingdom Hearts 3, World War Z. You can hear me right now on Toonami during the current arc of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind as Pesci. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be covering a lot of stuff here today. We will do a few Breath of the Wild 1 questions if some comes up, like how you kind of got started with that and what the interview process and stuff was like when you initially went through, and then we'll talk about some of your other stuff. We have a list of questions that we put out from our Discord and Twitter and a bunch of places that we've gathered, so we'll be covering a lot here.
Awesome.
So it'll be a bit more variety than last time when we had you on, when it was just Zelda questions.
It's
basically
just free for all, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So Daniel, do you have a question picked out that... Wait, first off, before anything begins,
All right.
just to be clear,
Yes.
do you have any specific projects right now that you're working on that you would like people to check out more than anything? Like if there's one or two things that are most important for you that are coming up or that you're a part of right now that people can go and watch to give you some support.
I am very proud of the work that we're doing on JoJo's. You know, voicing Pesci has been a lot of fun, and it's great. You know, even though he's kind of like a minor player in you know, the grand series of Golden Wind, you know, I found out that he has a cult following, and
Nice.
It's great to be able to like visit just in his arc and like tell his story. It's a lot of fun, and been getting a lot of love on Twitter for that. So thank you guys. Yeah, definitely check that out on Toonami.
All right, and Daniel, please start us off with our first official question from the fans.
Absolutely. So yeah, I threw a little list together. Gus Laz, who is actually one of our supporters on Patreon as well, he asked a question for Joe: what kind of direction did you receive that helped you to build your character for the game? So I guess when he doesn't specify whether Daruk or Yunobo, but I guess for both. So.
Well, it's really funny because when we went in to do the original audition for Breath of the Wild, we didn't know what we were auditioning for. There had been like some inklings, some whisperings, but all we knew was that it was a project for Nintendo and that it was very kind of medieval-esque. And so my gut reaction was like, is this a new Fire Emblem game? So I didn't know exactly. And as a voice actor, you go over the script, you go over the material like 1,000 times because you look for anything. You would look for any mention of a Princess Zelda or a Hyrule or Link or whatever you can to kind of give you an idea of what franchise you're working with so that you know what world that you're living in, if that makes any sense. And apparently they scrubbed the audition sides and they made very sure not to give any hint as to what it was that we're doing. So again, I didn't know what we were going with, and the direction, like I said, was a very sort of medieval-esque kind of approach. And I remember reading this one side for a character by the name of Hannibal, because keep in mind, they weren't calling him Daruk. He wasn't Yunobo in the final version, or at least in the edition sides, it was Hannibal. And the description was that he was like this big, burly, and I kind of got this like barbarian-esque vibe. I specifically remember the direction was like kind of in the vein of Gimli from Lord of the Rings. Again, just this big, bolsterous, larger-than-life, fun-loving kind of a character. And so that was something that we continue to work on and refine. And that was the audition. We worked on it in the callback, again, not knowing what it was that we were actually working on. And then months and months and months pass, and I go in for my first day of recording, and they tell me, hey, just so you know, this is the new Zelda Breath of the Wild game. It's like, whoa, okay, that, so you kind of have to let that initial shock and that kind of sink in, and then you go to work. And so you're diving into everything. And at this point it was, a lot of the animation had been done. Some of the dialogue had been recorded in Japanese. So in a lot of respects, we were doing kind of a dub. And so, trying to get the lip flap and all that stuff. And so it's very technical in how you approach your delivery. But again, you want to try and honor the character, and you want to try and, live and breathe, what got you to this point, which was that very larger than life, boisterous, over the top kind of a character, if that makes any sense.
Totally.
And then with Yunobo, it was just, can you be like very awkward and nerdy and 16, 17 years old? And it's like, I can do that. So yeah, that's kind of how that worked out.
You just have to tap into your past.
Yeah. Not much of a stretch.
All right, Stealth, do you have the Google Doc open at the very bottom for the questions?
I do.
All right, yeah, you can go ahead and ask your question, and then I'll go after. If you have one picked out already.
Yeah, so this is from Candy Last, another Patreon supporter. Do you have any idea who Link's father is in Breath of the Wild? Because according to my research, his father was a Hyrulean knight for the royal family, and it is said when Link was 4 years old, he could beat anybody with the sword. And furthermore, who was his mom?
This is getting into the theory.
Very good theory
territory.
Gosh, I wish I could give you some insight. I don't have any to give. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is something that I always wondered, is if the people that work on the game get into all the fan theories and stuff as well.
It varies from project to project. Sometimes you'll be working on things that they don't tell you until 2 seconds before, and you're kind of flying blind. And inversely, there are certain directors that will give you the entire backstory. and not to knock that, I actually kind of prefer when everything that's going on, all the given circumstances. working on Zelda and working with Jamie Mortellaro, who is the director, he's also the voice of Sidon. He kind of leans more towards on the I'm going to give you as much information as possible side of directing things. So he was telling me like, oh, and this happened, and like, you know, it's 100 years have passed, and like there's this earthquake, and Ganon is now free, and all this other stuff. And so it was like he was giving me a backstory, but unfortunately at no point did we ever get any backstory on Link with respects to like his family and all that stuff. So believe me, I know that's like $1 million question right there.
All right. I don't know if you would be able to answer this, but going back to the first question, this is about Breath of the Wild 1. Do you know, because you said it was about 3 months before you came back to do the actual first day of voiceovers from your auditioning. Do you know like around what that timing was?
It was a long process, longer than probably any other game that I've ever worked on. I want to say that we did the initial auditions in February, March, around that time, and this was probably about 2016, because the game released in 2017. So February, March, around that time. Again, nothing really had been announced, so you know, we were flying very blind. Yeah. And you do the audition. And I came back for maybe a callback probably about a month afterwards. Now, let me tell you, let me peel back the curtain a little bit with respects to like the voiceover community and working on other video games. There are jobs that you can audition for on Monday and you'll be recording that Thursday or Friday, if not the next day. So the fact that you have to wait a month to do a callback is a little unusual, you know, and again, you know, we did it, and they, you know, the feedback I got was it was great, we loved you, it was awesome, you know, everybody's loving you, and then you don't hear anything. And usually when that amount of time passes and you don't hear anything, that's kind of just okay, well, you're not right for the role, you're not, you know, you didn't book it. And so, you know, everybody you keep getting emails, oh yeah, sure, and like I said, it's one of those things where you kind of believe it when you see it. You know, you so much time passes, and you know, sometimes you think, oh, you know, did the project get scrapped? Are they doing rewrites and anything? Meanwhile, come to find out that, you know, people at Nintendo, they were going over all of our auditions. They were, you know, again, you know, having to sign off on a lot of stuff, having to approve things. And so, you know, this was going up the food chain at Nintendo, and they were kind of having to, you know, have their own sort of internal discussions and feedbacks and everything. So it took time.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I remember from when we had Patricia Somerset, for those who don't know, the voice actress for Zelda, she mentioned something about whenever she was doing one of her voiceovers or auditions or something like that, she was unaware, but in the other room, on a conference call, they had some of the people from Nintendo of Japan listening in. So I can imagine how stressful it is. Because especially like after you get told about it, because you're like, oh my gosh, like what if it was... Yeah. You know, like Aonuma or someone. It looks like we have a super chat here for $5 from Halo Justin. Says, what were your favorite rock/bombs to eat when you were doing the voice acting for the Gorons?
Oh God, what were my I don't even know how to answer that question.
What kind of minerals are you?
Yeah, what kind of minerals? I don't even know.
Yeah, there is the side quest where you have to fetch the sirloin bomb.
Yeah, the Dongo sirloin.
Yeah. Whatever it was called.
You know, it's funny because talking with a lot of people that have made it all the way through the game, you were talking about the side quest. A lot of people either loved or you hated that Yunobo escort mission, that quest that went on. Mm-hmm. There were some people that were like, "Oh my God, this is like an awesome friggin', you know, quest. This is an awesome mission." And then you get other people that are like, by the end of it, I wanted to chuck Yunobo like off a cliff. So, you know, I you either loved it or you hated it.
I actually liked one of the Goron quests in that game where you had to stand on like the hot pan and last. That was really cool.
I
Yeah.
think we actually have another super chat
Oh.
in the chat here from Torn and Prince, donated $2. But yes, Joe, who do you like more? I guess if you have to choose, between Daruk or Yunobo.
Oh no, don't make me choose. Oh no. That's like choosing my children. I
Oh.
can't do that. You know, they're both like two parts of me, because I feel like when you're a voice actor, you kind of have to tap into certain experiences or certain qualities and all that. And I think we were kind of talking about it earlier, where Yunobo was like 16-year-old me that was like very awkward and very nerdy and very unsure of himself, and that was me back in the day, back in high school. And Daruk is kind of me now, kind of like I'm a dad. So, he kind of has that more fun-loving persona, very just kind of big, bolsterous, very, that's, yeah. So I hope that answers your question. I don't think it's a cop-out. I hope it's not a cop-out, but
Nah,
yeah.
it's a wholesome answer.
Or
Just hope you don't share his fear of dogs.
No, gosh, that's cat dogs.
yeah. So Daniel, I believe it is now your turn again. If there's any non Breath of the Wild questions in there to make it varied.
Okay, let's see. Actually, I'm just gonna skim through these. As far as non Breath of the Wild, okay. Well, AJ, who is a pretty frequent viewer that I see in the chat quite a lot. He asks, what steps would you recommend for someone who does voice acting for fun, but maybe not professionally yet, to get to where they can make it into a career?
Yes, our other co-host, she couldn't make it, but she has her own YouTube channel, the Geek Apprentice. She is a amateur voiceover to where she does some jobs, and I actually messaged you a while back, Joe, asking for advice that I could give to her, because she's done some smaller stuff for games and indie projects and things. So
she's started to get a few paid things now, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we keep calling her an amateur?
I don't know. She's been in a couple
saying.
of indie games and stuff, and some YouTube projects. So what advice would you give on this?
It's definitely a process, and a lot of people sort of treat it as like maybe a hobby, or maybe like even a side job or something like that. You need to treat it like a business. Like, whether you realize it or not, when you go into voice acting or just acting in general, you are becoming your own company. And sometimes that requires a certain level of like business savviness, if that's even a word. You need to there's a certain amount of overhead too when you think about starting up your own business. Like, I need the recording materials, I need the microphone, I need the demos, I need the websites and all that stuff. And that's something that can set you back quite a bit. But if you look at it like, hey, I am investing in my future, I'm investing in a business, then maybe that helps. I can also tell you, I got my bachelor's degree in theater. And so my parents kept busting my butt, trying to like, hey, we want you to do grad school. After, all those years in college, I really didn't want to go to graduate school. But I'll tell you what I did. I started taking voiceover classes. And I did a couple of years of those. And to me, that was my graduate program. That was my graduate degree, was going out to LA and taking, I don't know how many different voiceover classes that I did. And that was, an extension of my education. So again, there's a couple of different ways you could slice it. Something else that I've talked with a lot of voice actors about is having a really good support system. You got to have that. You got to have kind of like a stable 9-to-5 job, or like just a stable home situation. It helps if you have people in your life, friends, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, that support you in what you do. It's so important to have people that are very like-minded. People that you can bounce ideas off of, people that, inspire you, people that, and it doesn't have, that's not exclusive to just voiceover. That's anything. Find people that will fan that flame so that you can pursue what it is that you want to do. I had a girlfriend back in college. I was a very unhealthy relationship. It was a very toxic kind of a relationship. And, she was always kind of complaining, like, why are you doing voices? What's up with that? What's with the voices? I don't know, and I kind of emotionally I kind of cut that part of myself off for a long while. It's like, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe this is something that I shouldn't pursue. So again, it's important to have people around you that will cultivate and nurture and inspire you and feed into all of your interests. So it's a lot. Yeah. That's the best advice that I can give. Find like-minded people. Yeah, stick with them.
All right. Not to skip stealth here, but we have a question that kind of goes along with it. It's right above it on the Google Doc from our friend Gus, who says, "For Joe, do you see yourself as a positive role model for young Hispanic Latina gamers, but as well for aspiring voice actors who are also Hispanic?"
You know what? You just reminded me of something that happened. I was at SAC Anime. A couple of us were at SAC Anime last year. And you're signing autographs and you're shaking hands and you're meeting with fans. And at one point there was a fan that came up to me that was Hispanic and said, "You know what, man? It's great to see someone up here that looks just like me. That's someone that I can relate to, someone that looks like, somebody that I went to school with, somebody that, I would know." And it was a moment. It was just one of those things where, like, I kind of had to, keep holding back and fight the tears a little bit, because there's not too many. The amount of representation, at least in the voiceover community, isn't what it should be. With respects to African American numbers, Asian, Hispanic. I feel like we're getting there, but man, we still got a long ways to go. So believe me, that is not lost on me, man. That I'm not just doing this for myself, but it also sets the tone for other people to come, and follow kind of in these footsteps. Believe me, I'm very aware of that.
All right. Wonderful answer there. I love those stories like that. So stealth. Ignoring the Google Doc here, do you have any questions on your own that you would like to ask, whether it has to do about gaming or anime or anything else?
Yeah, there was actually a question on the doc that I found kind of interesting that I do want to hear the answer to.
All right.
So, did you try to take any creative liberty with the role and the script that you were given? And if so, how do you think the people at Nintendo would have reacted to that?
Creative liberty, I mean, it's tough because, like, I'm not gonna go off the rails or anything like that. I mean, it's a collaborative process when you're creating a character like this and you're working on a franchise like this. The character that you come in with on day one is not the same character that you end up leaving with, day 35 or whatever, it is that however long we were recording. And one of the things that was great is that I had an amazing director in Jamie Mortellaro, who's been a part of some amazing freaking franchises. I mean, he's directed Hitman, he's directed Horizon Zero Dawn. I mean, you look at his resume, speaks for itself. And so you have someone like that who's in your corner. They flew in people from Nintendo to come in and sit in on our sessions. And ordinarily, that would be very intimidating, which it was to a certain degree. But when it came to listening back to some of the audio and some of the takes and everything, I would say I was probably my own worst critic. Knowing this franchise, knowing what it means to so many people, you want to get it right as much as you possibly can. And it's a process where you're continuing just to refine and sharpen your skills and sharpen the character. And it's like I can't stress enough how much of a collaborative effort it was. You know, like I said, I bring a lot of my own personality to Daruk and Yunobo, and so you kind of have to live in those worlds, you know, of their headspace and what they're going through, and it's such a team process with everybody, start to finish. You know, you want to please the director, you want to please the producers, but you also want to please yourself. And one of the things that I appreciate about Nintendo, at least working on this process, was that they gave us the time. I can't tell you the number of video games that I've worked on, and not to knock anybody, I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but a lot of times, you know, and we get it, time is money. You know, sometimes projects are under a crunch, you know, deadlines being what they, you know, we need to turn it out yesterday, all this other stuff. You know, with Nintendo, they gave us the time. We had a lot of time to, again, refine it and work on it. And I think in a certain instance, like, you know how I said, you know, the character that you end up with at the end of the process isn't the same that you end up with at the beginning. I think at a certain point we even went back and you know, worked on some of those first couple of scenes that we had worked on, you know, the first 2 days or so, because finally you're hitting your sweet spot. You got your stride going. And so it's like, hey, let's just go right back into it. Which, again, when you have the time, do it. Yeah.
Awesome. We looks like we got another super chat from same Halo Justin again, and he wanted to ask if you had your own JoJo stand, what would it be like? Would it represent your personality, and what would it be like? What power would it have, and how would it look?
I mean, is Beach Boy good? I mean, I like Beach Boy. Beach Boy's a really good stand, right? That's a good one. I gotta represent for Pesci. You know, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what my stand would be, but it would have to do with like time control. Like there's not enough time in the day. There is never enough time. So to be able to like go back in time or fix something, or, you know, something to that effect, like it would have to be time based, because I like, for me, that's huge. Time is precious.
So true.
All right. Wait, so now it's my turn. Okay, so on the JoJo thing, how did that come about? This whole Toonami gig. Is it fair to call it Toonami gig? Or are they the ones?
It's JoJo's. Like JoJo's, yeah. You know, JoJo's is the series, and then, you know, Toonami just has their block, and they've got, you know, all, you know, some great anime going on every Saturday night on Cartoon Network. No, I got brought in to go work on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I was, you know, pleasantly surprised. And I started digging and doing some research on the character, so I kind of had an idea. And then, you know, you go in to record day one, and, you know, if you've ever seen Pesci and what he looks like, he has this kind of funny turn-up looking head. And, you know, everybody in JoJo's is so serious, and everybody's so, you know, macho, over the top, and all that stuff. And so Pesci is kind of a goofy character a little bit. And so one of the first things that we did when I started recording was, how do we find the voice? How do we find a voice that, you know, meets the look of the character, but also fits within the world of JoJo's? And, you know, Tony Oliver, who's directed, and he starred in so many anime, I can't even begin. I mean, look him up. His resume speaks for itself. He's done anything and everything anime. I mean, the guy is like freaking legendary. And, you know, we're kind of just, again, like I said, with Jamie, it's a collaborative process. You know, you kind of go and you refine it, and you kind of find a place where everybody is happy. And Pesci, he just kind of has this kind of nervous, kind of, constipated sound with him a little bit because he's very unsure of himself. He's kind of like Yunobo, like in that sense, where just very, unsettled, very nervous, not sure of himself. And I threw in just a slight little New York sound, but, it just kind of gives him this, like, constipated feel because, he looks like he's got a head like a turnip, and so, you don't know what's going to happen. And even in the episodes that we worked, it's great to see him start off being very unsure of himself, very unconfident. He's, as they call him, he's the Mamoni of the group. And then by the end of his arc, he believes in himself, which is great. Again, you find the trajectory, you find the arc in each and every character that you work on, and to me, that's a great one. So, yeah.
I love it. I think you're the first person who's ever, voice actor or any other actor that I've talked to that has described, used the word constipated to describe their take on a character.
It is a mood, believe me. That is one way to draw inspiration.
That's fantastic.
All right, and I guess it's back to you, Daniel.
Okay.
I guess we're closing in on the 40-minute mark here. I mean, we had about an hour, so I guess if we can do like 2 more rounds of questions.
Sure.
So it's that, I guess 6 more questions. All right, so start off, Daniel.
So Rin, who submitted on Discord a question, what was your favorite cutscene in Breath of the Wild to record?
Just to be clear, that's not Breath of the Wild 2. It's saying Breath of the Wild 2 record.
Yeah. Yes, sorry.
I'm just saying for the people listening.
Yes, that's right. So no one's
It's
confused.
close. I mean, I loved a lot of the cutscenes that we worked on, in the original game. Backing out a little bit and kind of looking at the big picture, I really, really love the stuff that we did for the Champions Ballad DLC. Like that to me, that was so much fun. Between the incident with the dog, and then the very end, when we all take the picture together.
Yes.
That was the last thing I recorded on that project, and that was like just such a great frickin' moment. It was a great bookend to work on, because everybody's like, it's kind of like this beautiful send-off, and so it really touches you, and even in that Champions Ballad DLC, we get a lot from Daruk. There's a lot going on where you dive a little bit deeper into each and every character, and that was definitely a moment where Daruk has this moment where he just like goes in and he dives and kicks a lot of butt and does all that, and then meanwhile he's afraid of a dog. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go real quick on the DLC, because kind of going back to the timeline of when we recorded.
Right.
I think we started recording Breath of the Wild originally like late July, early August, around that time. And then the game came out and it was a big success and everything was good and well received, and then they announced the DLC, and so we're kind of wondering like what's going on. And again, they announced the Champions Ballad DLC well before, and so I didn't get a phone call, like nothing had happened, and so we're kind of wondering like, oh, are they going to bring us back for that, or are we not? I'd be happy to come back and reprise my role as Daruk. I'd do it 1,000 times. And then I think it got a email, probably it was in late, 2017. It was probably around September, so almost like a full year had passed. And we did it, and it was great. Again, we got to do those cutscenes and do everything else. But again, sometimes you work on a project and they don't tell you exactly when it's coming out, because sometimes they're still in development, they're delayed, so on and so forth. And so you go and do it, and that's on you. Move your way on to the next project. So like I said, that was probably about September, October-ish. Meanwhile, I'm at the Video Game Awards in early December, like about a month and a half tops later, with
Right.
Patricia and Elizabeth Maxwell. And we're sitting there, Zelda wins, Game of the Year 2017, we're all happy. And then like that, they announced the DLC is released that night. Like
Yeah.
that was just as much of a surprise and a shock to me as it was for everybody else when it came out. So again, like, pleasant surprise, timetable, who knows?
Yeah,
They just do it when they want to do it.
Patricia, she said that exact same story whenever we interviewed her, and she said everyone was just freaking out because she said she didn't even know they were going to be showing it off, let alone like releasing it that same day.
Yeah.
And I remember my friend RMFH, who has another YouTube channel. We were watching it, and then like they were like live tonight the DLC, and it's like, what, like today? I have to sleep. Like,
I mean, it was great getting the
That's true.
preview. Like, if they had done just the preview, I would have been like, okay, that's cool. And then at the end of that trailer, if you remember, available now, it was like, what? That's
Yeah.
crazy. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember that being a huge shock.
It was a huge shock. And I remember saying to my wife, thank God I just finished my playthrough of Mario Odyssey, because now I can come back to this game.
Because
Yeah.
I remember before that we hadn't heard a lot about the DLC at all, and for it to be a shadow drop like that, that was pretty exciting.
It was
Yeah.
great.
I
Yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead, Jess.
I was gonna say, like, I always wondered, for instance, on some projects they'll do like DLC around the same time as the actual game and stuff, or
Sometimes they do.
yeah, but they made it explicitly clear on Breath of the Wild that all of the DLC was worked on after the actual game released, because you always get those people that are like, well, why didn't it release with the full game? And it's like, well, if it released with the full game, you would be waiting another year or two to play it. So like, just be happy playing it now, and then pay the extra like $10-$20 to play like what they give you as extra.
Come on, you just get more game later. That's not a problem.
Yeah, and then what was it? So it made me wonder if some of the, because you mentioned like they announced the DLC, but then you went so long without getting a call, and like with the Avengers movie, Infinity War, and then Endgame, they recorded both of the movies at the same time, basically, and they even recorded some of what was it, the Captain Marvel movie. Because that movie came out in between, so they recorded parts of her scenes while they were making the movie. And there's a bunch of interviews where they said that like they recorded a bunch of scenes, and then they would go and watch Infinity War, and then like they're like, well, where was this at? Like, why is that not in the movie? Or like, why is this scene chosen and not this one? And then it ends up that scene was just later on used for Endgame. So it made me wonder if Breath of the Wild may have had a similar process, to where there may have been some scenes that went unused in the original Breath of the Wild game that ended up being used in the DLC. Was there any cases where hints?
Not that I can recall. Not that I can recall.
So
unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to make it all the way through in Breath of the Wild. I probably played about a total of 8 hours.
Yeah.
I have this really, really nasty habit of starting games and not finishing them, because inevitably what ends up happening is like life happens. And I have a 2-year-old, so like it's really hard to commit like 40-50 hours to a game. It stinks. And like that's why for me Smash Brothers is like those quick, like just kind of grab and go games, like a Tetris 99 or a Smash Bros, or just something like you can pick up and play real quick.
We had Sean, for the people that don't know, the voice actor for Rivali, we had Sean on a live stream after, it was like a month after we had his interview, playing Smash Brothers. And he was just destroying everyone. Like we had like 20 different
he
people.
Himself in his Smash Brothers ability.
Yeah, not one person came close. Like, because he played with us for about an hour or two, and not a single person beat him. He just demolished everyone, and it was a very, very sad moment for all of us. But Stealth, do you have your next question up?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this earlier, but how did it feel to get the news that you could voice someone in a Zelda game? So you mentioned that you had like an initial shock moment where you kind of found out right on the spot that you were working on Zelda, but like, do you have any other feelings about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I had mentioned before, we had people from Nintendo fly out, for our sessions and everything, and the pressure was definitely on. When you realize that this is a launch title, that this is a part of the Zelda franchise, that it comes with some pretty high expectations. However, like I said, I'm my own worst critic, and I would say probably most of, like 98% of all the pressure that I was feeling was self-inflicted. Everybody was super kind. Everybody was like really cool. Everybody, the producers, the directors, like all just, could not be nicer. I was tough on myself. I was beating myself up because, again, what comes with, a video game such as this. And so, there would be times where you go back to your car at the end of a session and, you kind of have this like moment of reflection. Like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I'm working on a freaking Zelda game. I grew up playing the original NES version. Like, 5-year-old me grew up playing this game. And so it's just this surreal moment where you as a gamer, as a kid, are able to sort of like live and like through something that you grew up with. It, believe me, it is not lost on me, man. It's and my expectations for this were just as high as everybody else's. So
it almost makes me more confident having someone who's actually a fan of the series in that role. But yeah, more confident in the delivery that they'd bring, because they know the gravitas of it. The question is not one that's fan submitted, but kind of, I guess, circling back a little bit with the DLC. You mentioned that there was quite a bit of gap between everything wrapped up and recorded with the base game, and then you're just left for a while wondering, and then they brought you guys back in, obviously, to record everything for the Champions Ballot. With all that time in between, was there anything, like any difficulties trying to get yourself back in, or is it like riding a bike and you just instantly you're Daruk again?
I'd say it was kind of like riding a bike, and it was like that, where where at this point, you've already taken all of your lumps, and you've kind of figured it all out, and you kind of know where the character lives vocally and in their personality, and so it's it was like riding a bike again. And you go back and do it, and they give you some audio references and some samples, and you kind of just try and tweak your placement a little bit and just kind of try to get consistent with what was done before. But ultimately it wasn't anything too difficult, and like I said, that working on the DLC was just fun. It was just fun. Because again, you're just going back and revisiting the character, and you're seeing different sides, and that felt less like work, and just more like, hey, we get to play.
Yeah.
We know what we're doing at this point. Let's just have fun doing it.
And at that point, you already have the success of how great everyone thinks the game is. Like all of the major review sites are giving it 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. Everyone, like there's always the people that's like, oh, Breath of the Wild, it's the worst Zelda game because it has voice acting. Just because they just don't want voice acting. But for the people that actually give it a chance, like there's a lot of people that love the voice. Like for every one person who's been negative about it, there's probably 100 or 1,000 that love it that just don't say anything. They're just like, oh yeah, it's great, but
people are gonna love it, people are gonna hate it. That's how it is.
So I imagine it was a lot easier for all of you to go back in and not be as nervous, be like, well, you know, Zelda's never had voice act. Well, the last time it did, it was like the CDI things that people don't they don't really talk about it. Yeah.
that's the difference.
Yeah. So like, you know, you're going into it with that thought in your head whenever you first, but then when you go do the DLC, you already have the approval of everyone. So at that point, it's just fun. So I like that for you. And I wanted to know, so after Breath of the Wild release, they announced that they are working on DLC. They give the season pass or whatever they call it, where you can get the 2 bundles or whatever, to where you get the what is it? There's the Champion's Ballad, and then there's the
Trial of the Sword.
Trial of the Sword. Yeah.
Master Trials. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in your head, what are you thinking this Champion Ballad or like this extra story to go along with Breath of the Wild is? Because what everyone was hoping for, like I don't know if you looked up videos or articles and stuff, but a lot of ideas that everyone was hoping for was, you see these cutscenes of Hyrule 100 years ago, and like what Hyrule Castle Town looked like and everything, and you get these memories and everything. And a lot of people were hoping that the Champion's Ballad would have been, instead of like Link in the cutscenes following Zelda around and getting all of these memories, instead of it just being cutscenes, they were hoping you would actually be able to play Hyrule 100 years ago and be able to go into Castle Town and explore like you did in Twilight Princess and a lot of the other games. But it was just more of the same. But it was good. Like the way that Champion's Ballad first starts out is one of my favorite parts of any games, because it completely turns the game around into like a big stealth mission. No pun intended for stealth being on here. But it's like a big stealth mission, and you play through the entire area of the Great Plateau, and you know it from like one side to the other. You know it really well because of how much you've gone through the entire 10 hours, 20 hours, 100 hours that you've been playing the game, and suddenly that's turned around to where it's a giant stealth mission. So they did do
a stealth mission when you played it.
It was for me because
when I played it, it was a slaughterhouse.
So the question is like, what was your thoughts on, okay, they may be having me come back to record more cutscenes or voiceover work for this character. What kind of story are you thinking it's going to be? Was it any different than what actually came? Or
not really. I mean, I'm glad that we were able to kind of go back and get a little bit more backstory on a lot of the champions, and I feel like what it did is it really kind of fleshed out their characters a little bit more. Like I said, you know, you definitely get a lot in that short DLC with respects to the storytelling side of things, and so that was an element that I loved. I mean, I had read some theories like, oh, are you able to, you know, maybe possibly play as some of the champions and so on, and you know, that would have been really cool. But again, when you approach working on something like this, especially with the DLC, you know, you kind of have to leave your expectations with respects to the gameplay, you know, at the door, because, you know, that doesn't do anybody any good, and I'm certainly not going to tell Nintendo how they should or shouldn't do their franchises. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I was just happy going back and revisiting the character and going back and playing, like I said. For me, that was everything right there. And it was a great experience because enough time had passed where, you just remember everything so fondly, and then you're coming back and it's still fresh, but there's still something new that you could bring to the table with it. So.
All right. So Stealth, are you still here with us?
I'm still here.
All right. Can you give your final question, and then Daniel will give his final question, and we'll end it for everyone since we're heading on that hour mark. So go ahead and give your final question if you have one. It can be from you or the Google Doc, just whatever you would like to ask.
Sure. Well, question that I have is, are there any other video game series that, kind of in an ideal world you'd love to work on? Anything that you're a fan of?
So last year I worked on a very, very cool franchise that was very near and dear to my heart. Can't talk about it. As a comic book fan, I'm geeking out about it. That's all I can say. Very, very surreal. I got to do some performance capture in it, so it was an awesome experience start to finish. So there's that. There's the comic book nerd in me. As far as other franchises that I'd probably like to look into, Metroid. I'm a big Metroid fan. Big Metroid fan. That is a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart, and gosh, oh man, I know, Metroid Other M, when that came out, it wasn't very well received, unfortunately. Yeah, that is a franchise, that is a world I would absolutely love to play in.
Yeah,
I think you could pull off a mean Samus.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess if we're wrapping this up, Stealth pretty much asked what the question I was going to, so I have to think of another one.
Uh-oh.
But that's okay. Well, I guess what I'll ask instead. So, you mentioned earlier, you grew up playing through Zelda, on your NES when you were a wee small Joe. Throughout the many iterations of the Zelda, series, what's the game that's, I guess, stuck with you, or there's a sense of nostalgia there that's been maybe not objectively you can say it's the greatest one, but the one that's just near and dear to your heart if you had to choose?
Are you talking about the Zelda franchise?
Yeah, just the whole series as a whole. Yeah.
It's kind of a tie. Ocarina of Time. Look, that's huge. Come on, it's Ocarina of Time. It was such a great freaking game. I poured so much time into it, and just from a storytelling and a gameplay perspective, that was, gosh, it's hard to beat. If there is a close second, if not outright tie, was Wind Waker. Loved Wind Waker. Loved the aesthetic. I know Toon Link got a lot of hate, but Wind Waker. Love the sort of open worldness of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of fond memories playing that game.
Both superb choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the entire development cycle of Ocarina is crazy. If you go back and read the first initial interviews, Miyamoto was talking about how it was basically going to be similar to Super Mario 64, to where the entire game was going to take place inside of Ganon's castle, because they just didn't know how powerful the Nintendo 64 was, and then they found out exactly what it could do and what it couldn't do, so then they gave it this huge world outside of the castle.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy to think it was just going to be like this thing that would have probably been really good, but not nearly as good as it ended up being. So
Yeah.
It's crazy how things change through the development. But anyways, when we were talking a few weeks ago, you mentioned a convention that was coming up where it was kind of a reunion for a bunch of the voiceover people for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, a bunch of us are getting together at 2D Con, and that's in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's going to be August 28th through the 30th of this year. Again, it's very rare that we do these get-togethers where we get, everybody. And I don't know if we got everybody, but we got a lot of members of the cast. So if you guys are able to come out, it'd be great to see everybody. Again, we kind of do this every once in a while. A couple of us were there for SAC Anime last year. Some of us got together for Salt Lake Gaming Con. So again, we'll go where there's interest. But I mean, to be able to get a lot of the core cast together is pretty hard. So yeah, I'd love to see you guys out there.
All right. And is there any other conventions that you'll be at?
I'm always there at San Diego Comic-Con. I'll be lurking around E3, which I know sometimes you guys will be there. So hopefully I'll see you guys in the flesh.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be great to see you and a lot of the other people. It's just the great thing about E3 and some of these conventions. It's just like you go there and you run into people that you never would have guessed you would have gotten the chance to meet in person. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys.
I don't really know. I'm always bad with the endings of these things. Yeah. So Daniel, where can people find you?
If they so choose to, they can look me up pretty much on all social media under Capt Burgerson, CAPTBURGERSON. I swear I know how to spell my own username. I do streams on Twitch 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and then usually Friday. Although I streamed earlier today instead of Friday because Valentine's Day was the thing. But other than that, I do the occasional random YouTube video, or I do work on this channel, either editing or voice or this podcast with Jesse. So you can always find me here as well. If for some reason my voice hasn't annoyed you to that point yet. So
all right.
That's me.
Stealth, where can people find you if they want to give you a follow?
You can find me on Twitter at Stealth40K, and as I mentioned, I talk a lot about video games. I partner with a lot of the publishers on giveaways, and yeah, so you can find me.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that you do a lot of giveaways. You're friends with a lot of people at different publishers and developers and stuff. You're always doing giveaways for different games on your Twitter. Is there any giveaways that you have coming up or that you would like to promote right now?
One just wrapped up that I did for 𝐂𝐴𝐻𝐾𝐿. But stay tuned, and I always have more to announce.
All right. And Joe, finally, where can people find more from you if they want to follow you and stay tuned?
Instagram and Twitter is at Joe Hernandez VO. I'm not really on Instagram that much, but Twitter, you can find me. I'm there all the time. Talking a lot about voiceover stuff and a lot of wrestling. I'm a big wrestling fan. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Me too. All right. So everyone, thank you all for watching. I know it's getting kind of late here on the East Coast, so thank you all. And everyone have a great evening or a night wherever you are in the world.
Have a good night, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.